All right, welcome everyone. We're going to start in just a minute, but just to confirm that everyone can hear and see me, you can put a number 1 in the chat. Just a number 1 in the chat. Awesome. You guys are on it. That was quick. I like it. Awesome. Thank you everyone for confirming. All right, it's 12:01, so there's still people coming in, but let's get started. All right, so welcome to NJ Thrives Thursdays. So we're live every Thursday at 12 p.m. with weekly webinars for New Jersey small business owners. I'm your host, Christian Pichardo, NJSBDC marketing consultant and CEO at nilumamedia.com. And today we have a special guest. We have Carol, which is director of the NJSBDC at Stockton University. So I'd like to welcome Carol in giving our introduction.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. As Christian said, my name is Carol Waddies, and I'm the director of the New Jersey Small Business Development Center at Stockton University. We're part of the New Jersey Small Business Development Centers network, and my staff, my consultants, and I provide counseling and management consulting and technical assistance to establish, startup, emerging, and prospective small business owners in Atlantic, Cape May, and Cumberland counties. A little bit about today's webinar, Analytics for Small Business. So welcome. This is going to be an incredible program. Just to tell you about who we are. So for over 40 years, the New Jersey Small Business Development Center Network has been the premier provider of comprehensive services and programs for small and mid-sized businesses in New Jersey with wide infrastructure, diverse facilities, intellectual and knowledge capacities. We have private sector experts. The NJSBDC network, we have 12 regional centers and over 20 affiliates and satellite offices located throughout the state of New Jersey. And we do this through public-private partnerships with colleges, universities, chambers of commerce, and other business organizations. Now, our services include one-on-one counseling, training courses, and resources. Everything we do, it's confidential. So our business consultants will work with you one-on-one to develop a great idea into a fully functioning business and help you grow your business to the next level. We have training classes that are specifically created to help business owners develop a strong foundation in key areas of entrepreneurship. Our network, we've curated a collection of databases, partnerships, everything that's essential to properly start, sustain, and to grow a business. We provide these resources only to our clients at no cost. And these resources include research tools, lending programs, banks, software, and much more. So if you're a business owner in New Jersey, contact us for assistance in getting your business to where you want it to be. As a network, we've provided services in times of growth and crisis, and we continue to provide quality, accessible programs and services to the state's small and medium-sized business owners. The NJSBDC network is where businesses go to grow. Contact our network to find a center that's closest to your location. Once again, thank you for selecting a webinar with the New Jersey Small Business Development Center. I'm going to stop speaking, turn the program back over to Christian for a webinar that my clients and I are excited to attend.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Carol. So yeah, everyone that is on this call, on this webinar, please visit us, njsbdc.com. So as you can see there on the screen, no cost counseling, training and events starting at $0, and exclusive small business resources only available to clients. So that being said, let's go ahead and get into the agenda for today's webinar. So we're going to go over, actually, we have 2 headlines today. And we're going to go to the webinar and Q&A. So for the small business headlines of the week, so our network was actually, we actually earned an environmental leadership award. So the sustainable manager of the NJSBDC is working to change the narrative. And basically, we are helping businesses that are within sustainability programs, SBEAP, SBO programs and individuals, things like that across New Jersey. So that's a little bit about what had happened last week for our network. We're very proud of that. And here's another little tidbit. So in 2 weeks remain, so you can pre-register for phase 4 of the Small Business Emergency Assistance Grant Program. And we had to take it from Twitter because they don't put it on the news, right? So remember, this is open to nonprofits and small and micro businesses, and the grants are up to $20,000. So we're gonna put the links in the chat. So make sure to save those links if you qualify for this program. All right, so back to the presentation. 3 things to keep in mind before we start with the webinar. Type your questions into the Q&A box. So there should be on the bottom of your Zoom window, there should be an icon that says Q&A. So there is where you can type in your questions throughout the webinar. We're going to answer them towards the end. Number 2, after the webinar is over, you are going to receive a 3-minute survey. And once you submit the 3-minute survey, you'll be able to access the webinar materials of our presenter and also the on-demand recording, which is usually released between 24 and 48 hours after this webinar. Also, this event makes you eligible for our Upgrade Your Business certificate. So for more info on that, we're going to drop the link that is on your screen again in the chat. But without further ado, I'd like to welcome Mark Rogers, Assistant Professor at the Supply Chain Management Department of Rutgers Business School. I believe actually, is this the right title? I'm sorry if I didn't get it right.
Yep, that's the correct title, yes.
All right, perfect. I'm glad that went well. All right, cool. So the floor is yours, Mark.
Great.
Go
Awesome.
ahead. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing so you can share your screen.
Great. Thank you so much, Christian. And good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for attending. You know, this presentation, it's entitled The Power of Analytics, but it was really, I hope you all can see my screen, by the way. If you have any issues, let me know in the chat. But you know, this presentation is really motivated by my experience prior to me becoming an academic, working in industry, and having experienced some of the pain points of, you know, kind of leveraging data and, you know, kind of the current trends with how people are managing and utilizing data for different reasons. You know, this is actually my very first, not my very first, one of my few presentations that I've done that do not have any equations. So by and large, I'm an analytical researcher in supply chain. So I hope you all enjoy this. This is really kind of more of a roadmap to kind of guide you on your analytics journey, in whatever way is, you know, suitable for you as a business owner. So, but oops. Without further ado, obviously,
you said no formulas, by the way.
No formulas. That's correct.
Because math I didn't like math too much, but
yeah.
Let's get to it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll give you a little bit of background about me, and we'll talk about a couple of things just so you understand how data and information are related and how to unlock some breakthrough solutions using data and some sort of analytical methods and the appropriate tools, how you select them, what goes into kind of the selection process. And and last slide, I'll kind of wrap up with some resources that are kind of indicative, some of what, you know, are kind of typical for some of these applications. But without further ado, let me jump in here. So I'll give you a little bit of background just to kind of, you know, humanize myself, because oftentimes when you're in these kind of webinars, when I give lectures, I'm just kind of virtual lectures, I'm just kind of a video. But, you know, growing up as a kid, as you can see here, I was kind of a goofy kid. I was always into math and science. My mom, for some reason, liked to dress me up for Halloween. I guess I was a bunny or something. I don't know what that is. But I was a big math and science fan, a big nerd, a basketball fan as well. And unfortunately, I am an insufferable New York Knicks fan, although we've had some success this year. But, you know, early on, I was into math and science, and decided to go to undergrad at Rutgers University. And I've been at Rutgers in some way, shape, or form for most of my adult life. That's where I with my wife there, where you can see, and we're very much still married and very happy here. And I have a tiny human that we just gave birth to last year. But after I graduated from Rutgers University, I worked in industry at Bristol Myers Squibb in the pharmaceutical industry as an engineer. Did my master's in pharmaceutical engineering there, part-time, and then decided to transition into more of a supply chain career and go back to graduate school, where I went back to Rutgers to pursue my PhD in industrial engineering, and along the way picked up master's degrees in industrial engineering and statistics. So if you didn't believe I was a nerd then, I'm very much a nerd, and even kind of embodied that even further. So and along the way there, picked up some experience. I didn't want to be academic that didn't have any connections to the real world per se, that prototypical academic. So I decided to pick up some consulting experience with the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, and ZS Associates, and was a data scientist at Verizon once I graduated. And you can see that there's me holding up what I proposed to be the Kobe symbol. When Kobe got his 5th ring, he'll hold up the 5. So I have 5 degrees. That was my lame attempt at doing that. But and I've been on the faculty here now after I finished my PhD in industrial engineering at the Rutgers Business School for now I'm going into my 5th year. So but throughout this journey, research-wise, I've focused a lot on a lot of ugly mathematics, but really in search of decision sciences. So building large-scale systems optimization models from supply chains to the energy sector to the healthcare sector, and just providing guidance for a practitioner audience how to use some of these analytical tools as well. So this is really informed by all that. Thank you all for indulging me in that and allowing me to humanize myself a bit. But one of the important things to understand is the relationship between data and information. So I'll kind of dive into that a little bit more in this segment of the talk. But over the last several years, there's been a huge, what folks have been calling a data rush. So and this is prevalent across the board. And in our everyday lives, everything we do, especially with an electronic device, generates data in some way, shape, or form, whether we realize it or not, whether it's text data from a tweet, or point of sale data from your cashier, whatever it may be. A lot of things are just web-based, and they're generating data. And there's been a growth in revenue from the data market sector from about 2008, and it's projected to grow almost $60 billion through 2027. And this is in the context of big data, so massive amounts of data. But the challenge is with folks, and this is, for people who've leveraged data and have tried to dive into or leverage all this information that they're obtaining, only 28% of firms, when I say firms, it could be companies of all sizes, management consulting firms, healthcare facilities, you name it, only 28% of these firms who leveraged these sort of analytical tools or kind of dove into collecting all this data have actually been able to realize success and translate all this data and information into some sort of actionable solution. And you can see here on the slide, there's some of the success rates of different initiatives that some of these firms were trying to deploy. And in some cases, they started and had some benefits, no benefits, or just kind of had to abandon these these efforts altogether, right? Or just kind of didn't even start these efforts and just collected a bunch of data for no reason, which unfortunately happens quite often in practice. So, I will say a few words about, before I jump to the next slide. Well, actually, I'll jump to the next slide here. But I will say a few words about data complexity as well. Just so we're all kind of speaking the same language here. This is the closest thing I have to an equation per se on this slide, right? I look at two-dimensional matrix. Okay, so I was true to my promise here, but on the horizontal axis, you'll see there's the number of data sources. How many data sources do I have? Where do they come from, right? So it could be few or many, right? And when I say many, it's hundreds of thousands, to few, maybe 1 or 2. And then the volume or the size of data. So in terms of, and colloquially speaking, number of transactions that go through a system, right? Number of patients through a healthcare system, things like that. And you kind of have these 4 quadrants. And so obviously, in the lower left quadrant, simple data, you don't really need to use a lot of advanced analytics. You can rely on intuition in some cases. And even when you have diversified data as well, if you understand how those, how your system operates that you're working in, you don't really need to rely on advanced analytical solutions, although they can be helpful. But as you kind of get into the large volumes of transactions, daily transactions, minute by minute, more frequent transactions type of things, this is where you can rely on some of the more advanced analytical tools, of course, and obviously with complex data, it gets much more complicated.
So quick question, Mark.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, so in terms of what kind of data, as it relates to the presentation, I know that there's thousands, millions, points of data that we could be talking about, but as it relates to business, what kind of data sources are we talking about?
It could be a wide range of things depending on the way your business is structured. So, if you promote your business through the internet, it could be Google ad search clicks, right? Okay. Which would probably fall in the big data category because it's one type of data, right? Mm-hmm. Or it could be point of sale data if you have transactions that are managed, or it could just be unstructured type of data or just kind of data kind of runs the gamut. It just could be subject matter expertise. I've worked in this field for 30 years. I don't have a lot of hands-on numerical data, but I have subject matter expertise. That's where you kind of fall on the smaller side, right? Right. But it really runs the gamut. That's a good question, right? Right. But yeah, it runs the gamut, and I try to kind of provide some guidance in all those instances, right? So the folks that don't necessarily have large volumes of data or have subject matter expertise can walk away with something in terms of how they can manage their resources.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's a good question, Christian. Thank you for that. But also kind of as we're in today's society, there's one other kind of, if there were a three-dimensional axis, one of them will be velocity, right? So we get bombarded with data, notifications on your phone in real time, text messages. Things are coming to you in real time every day, email, tweets, social media, large volumes of data that are coming to you more frequently. So for more sophisticated applications, that's something you'd want to think about as well. But ultimately the goal with this, and this is one of the more academic slides, I'd say for me, this is a pyramid that's from the academic literature. It's called a data information knowledge wisdom pyramid. Basically, you have at the bottom of this pyramid, you have tons and tons of data from all different types of sources. And as you move up the pyramid, it takes something out of that data that's information. Oh, this kind of tells me one way or a relationship or kind of kind of a takeaway, right? It's something that, I learned something from this data. And then you translate that to the next step, which is insights, which is, okay, now I'm developing more expertise about what's happening, perhaps. And for those folks who have limited data or small data or subject matter expertise, you might move up that pyramid much more quickly than the folks with tons and tons of data, right? And trying to sift through that. But ultimately, the goal for us, for all businesses and, researchers as well, is to get to the point where I have all this data in some way, shape, or form. How do I translate that into some actionable insight so that I can use that information now to make a decision? I've got all this data. How can I get this to use this information that I have to make a decision? And oftentimes that leads through to a breakthrough insight now. And you'll see kind of this on the right-hand side of this slide here, you've got this needle in the haystack kind of thing, which is really indicative of the big data case. And for a lot of businesses, you may have large mountains of data and not even realize it in some cases. So, it's, that breakthrough insight is really difficult to achieve, which is kind of the motivation for me giving this talk. But it's really the proverbial needle in the haystack. That's what we're looking for. So hoping to provide you with a roadmap to get you there. Okay. Again, there's no equations here, just have notation. So don't be intimidated by this slide here. But what I'm showing you here, what I'm doing my best to articulate here is, let's say, what allows you to extract data, information from data, is understanding the interdependencies between the stuff you have. So on the left-hand side, you have this highly complex thing where, let's say you have X1 through X7. These can be different variables or degrees of freedom or things that you can change in your operation or things that you utilize in your operations or in your business. Most of the time, you know, if you're coming into this blindly, you would assume that all these things are independent of one another. They have no relationship between one another. So typically that has, you know, there's a lot of uncertainty, potentially more conflicts in that case. And if you're able to sift through that stuff, you'll have more information content, but you'll need much more data to get more confidence in your decision-making capabilities, right? Whereas on the right-hand side, you'll see these kind of directional, I have these arrows connecting X1 and X5 and so on and so forth in different directions. That's my way of saying, look, I know that X4, for instance, informs X1 and kind of is a precursor for certain things. And you'll see that in this graph. X7 is the one where things kind of stem out from there, right? So this is really kind of understanding the relationships. This is just a visual representation of that. If I know the relationship between the things in my system, or if I can unlock that stuff between, unlock that relationship, you don't necessarily need as much data or have to collect more data. You can rely more on your intuition and your subject matter expertise, given the inherent simplicity, as I call it, and understanding those relationships and unlocking that information and achieving actionable insights from that data. So this is just kind of a visual representation of that that I like to show.
So a quick example would probably be something like website traffic and sales volume, online sales volume, right?
Exactly, right. If you know the relationship between those two things, if it's a strong relationship, and sometimes, again, you may not necessarily have to collect much data to do that. You may rely on prior expertise or, you know, prior business ventures that you've been a part of that allow you to concretize that relationship, right?
Right.
Other things too, in a more transactional type of relationship is production and inventory, right? That's, you know, if I need to make stuff and then put it out on the floor to sell, right?
Yeah.
That's a relationship too. And location could be a part of that too. There's a lot of different variables here.
Right.
But
yeah.
It's a good point you make there for sure. Yeah. Cool. Okay. So I want to transition into more of how we can really start to unlock these breakthrough solutions here. So that's this next subtitle, this section of the talk here. But we're going to rely on, you know, we kind of developed this process here, or this framework that relies on concepts of information theory. And it doesn't require you to be an academic of sorts to really implement this stuff or really think about this. But, you know, what information theory suggests is these breakthrough solutions. This is a Venn diagram here, of course. So you have this driving question, or the asking the right question essentially, and using the right method to reach to understand or answer that driving question leads to breakthrough solutions. So I'll walk you through, you know, the latter half of this presentation, or this segment of this talk is focused on how do I understand or formulate a driving question, and then we'll talk about how to select the appropriate tool to get to that point where you can kind of marry the two and lead to a breakthrough. Okay. If you don't mind, Christian, I have an example, you know, for a hospital, for instance. I think, you know, given COVID, I think this is probably one of the more relevant ones, and folks can probably relate to this a bit more. But, you know, if you think about a hospital, this is just a simple example. Let's say that you have the cost of materials increase by 3% or a certain percentage over a year.
PPE,
and
PPE materials. Right.
Materials, PPE, exactly. You know, just general materials, overall operational costs, you know, that type of stuff. Yeah. And if you think about, you know, some hospitals have revenue growth targets. So let's say you have a growth target of 1% or whatever that may be. You have a target. You know, these are kind of, you have these conflicting objectives in a sense where you have to maintain a certain level of patient care quality in the face of this revenue growth challenge and maintaining or managing your operations to be cost effective. So you have this tug of war thing going on, this trade-off. And if you lean one way or another, you could potentially sacrifice something. So the worst thing you want to do as a healthcare organization, in particular a hospital, is compromise patient care, of course, right? Yeah. You want to make sure that patients have access to the resources that they need. But at the same time, you want to make sure that you're streamlining your operations efficiently. So not only can the patients receive care, but you're achieving your overarching goals as a facility, as an organization, to achieve these revenue growth targets. So, this is kind of something I'm, kind of talking about, this inherent conflict. And a lot of times in a business, some version of this exists. And this is a good example of that, where I want to reduce costs, but increase quality.
Yeah.
There's oftentimes an inverse relationship between cost and quality. There are several, what I'll call, competitive dimensions. Cost and quality are two of them. Some others are reliability, for instance, or even customer experience, right? Those types of things. So there are some inherent conflicts depending on your operation that you'll need to sift through. But the breakthrough solution kind of lies in addressing this inherent conflict that leads to a win-win type of solution. Okay. So I'll have a 5-step kind of process to really formulate your driving question. And we'll jump back to this hospital example if we have time to kind of show how this works. But I'll talk through this briefly if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this again, I know it's a very wordy slide, so I won't speak directly from the slides. I try not to do that unless I absolutely have to, because that's one of my, I hate when presenters do that, just kind of read off the slides. But this is critical for, I think this was an important slide when we've talked with other professors, other management practitioners, and folks from different areas, business owners and such, and really understanding this. So I hope you guys get some value out of this. So the first step in formulating this driving question is to really describe the business context. What am I facing at the moment, right? And that's pretty easy to do oftentimes. Like, I kind of know, but this kind of 5-step process kind of forces you to think about this kind of sequentially and logically, in a sense. The next thing we looked at is stating the positive and negative, or pros and cons, of a decision to highlight a trade-off. So the first step is really identifying the trade-off. Second step is saying, what happens if either way, if I make a decision in the trade-off? So we talked about the healthcare example, patient care versus cost. I know that now. That's really in step 2. So oftentimes people combine step 1 and step 2, which is fair enough, depending on your business area. Now, step 3 is to articulate this underlying assumption of what is leading to the positive and negative outcomes of the decision. So again, in the healthcare example that I'll use again, to provide a certain level, like I mentioned before, it's well known that there's an inverse relationship between cost and quality, right? So if you articulate that, it's stated and it's on the table, it's more information for you as you're formulating this win-win kind of scenario. So step 4 and 5 are really kind of build on each other. But step 4 is saying, okay, I need to formulate a win-win question that maintains the positive, but also kind of flips the negative. And I'll show you an example of that, because I can see how that can be kind of clumsy in a sense. And it's kind of hard to think about kind of flipping the negative. But then in step 5, we kind of clean it up to really formulate that driving question. So I'll show you the example of how we did this for the healthcare system. And we've actually tried this on a facility in Utah, myself and a couple other researchers. So we'll take a look at how we formulated this driving question, if you don't mind. So again, like I mentioned before, sometimes people combine steps 1 and step 2 together. So we need to increase patient quality of care, but we want to reduce, we have increased wait times, limited resources, cost constraints. That's the business context. We know the pros and cons there. And the basis of the trade-off, inverse relationship between cost and quality of care, and also some operational constraints as well. But when we think about the win-win in this instance, it's really the question is, can we increase the patient quality of care without compromising wait times? when we kind of looked into this a little bit more, kind of understanding the relationship, these wait times for different operations. Let's say you go in to get an X-ray, and you're in the ER. You sit in the room, wait to be seen. Then you get to a little triage area where you triage, and then you wait a little bit longer. And then you could even wait even further for an X-ray machine and for somebody to see you. So those wait times in between those touch time operations, and excuse me, I have my baby monitor here because my tiny human is screaming, so I apologize for that. But those wait times add up because there's staff time that's sitting there. There's idle equipment that's sitting there, right? So we found that wait time was the biggest driver of cost. So we thought that, in this case, how can we increase patient quality of care without compromising wait times? And then we dove a step further to say, to really hone in on these wait times is how do we distinguish medically necessary time from, I'm calling this wasted time. It's not necessarily wasted time, but time that doesn't contribute to patient care directly, right? So that was our driving question for us to then say, how do we move forward? That key question was allowing us to achieve a breakthrough solution. Okay, and I'll kind of come back to this, but I'll pause here. Christian, I don't know if you want to solicit questions from the audience or anything, because that was kind of a lot. That 5-step process is a lot to kind of unpack, but I do have an example of kind of how we walk that through. So yeah.
Sure. Yeah, let's do it. Let's take 2 or 3 questions.
Sure.
If anyone here has any questions, please drop them into the Q&A.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to dive deeper into these 5 steps.
5 steps. Yeah, or we can call it 4.5 steps, I guess.
Right.
If there aren't any questions, I can move forward. But I guess we can
All
take
right.
a minute
Let's
here.
see. No questions.
Okay,
All
good.
Right. We're good to go. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll assign a quiz at the end and assign grades at the end. No, I'm just kidding.
Well,
So
everybody better be taking their notes.
yeah, right. Just show up on your official transcript. And now we need, we've got our driving question that gives us, I refer to this as like a North Star, right? This is kind of that leads to a breakthrough. How do I then choose the right method in a sense? What do I choose? How do I analyze this? Or how do I get to this breakthrough solution? So, when I don't use equations, I like to use kind of 2x2 matrices and things like that to kind of describe my thinking. So I have these 4 quadrants here, and you'll notice that there's a shading, kind of black box to white box. Okay. If you kind of define some of these terms for you, so something like black box is I put a number into something and I get an output. I have no idea how it works. If so for instance, a good example of a black box tool is autocorrect. I type something in my phone and my phone magically knows what I mean to say, but for some reason, I have no idea what's under the hood and how it got to that solution, but it knows, right? But something that's a little bit more, black box is something I really have no visibility as to what's happening behind the scenes, right? Whereas something that's white box, there's some underlying framework. So when I get to something that's white box, I'm thinking of a call center operations where I have to manage staff on a certain schedule. I know my hours of operations. Presumably, I know my volumes, although there is some sort of uncertainty in those aspects there. But I, by and large, know how this system operates. I know my capacity, and I have more control over how I operate in a sense, right? So kind of as we transition from black box to white box tools tend to be much more AI driven, big data driven, whereas white box tend to rely on more human intuition, more expertise, more knowledge, right? So for instance, this first quadrant in the bottom left, the AI big data quadrant, which is much more relevant and prevalent in today's society, given where we are technologically. If I want to introduce a new product into the market, I may rely on an AI or a big data sales from, or big data from prior products that have entered the market, R&D investments, for instance, also at the same time. Something like research and development, we don't really know much about a product before it enters. So I may rely on data from other similar products in the market, or similar competitors, things like that. I'm able to obtain that. I'll go to the top left, which is rapid trial and error. So I'm sure we all drink coffee of some sort, right? Like I drink too much coffee at this point because, like I said, I have a tiny human and she does not sleep through the night. So I rely on caffeine quite a bit. So I'm sure some of those of you who have kids have been there. So I have a Starbucks app and Dunkin' Donuts app. I prefer Dunkin' Donuts to Starbucks, but for either case, I guess Starbucks seems to be more popular with folks. But
That's a big get
Starbucks,
serious for some people.
yeah, it gets very serious, and I don't want to step on any toes. So I prefer Dunkin' Donuts just because it's consistent for me. Just my opinion. But that notwithstanding, Starbucks will take some data based on what I buy. Dunkin' Donuts does this too. I go to Starbucks and let's say I get the same 2 or 3 things every so often. And I create a rewards account with Starbucks, and Starbucks can now say they know my birthday, they know where I live, and they know all the Starbucks locations in the area, right? And as a result of that, as I'm driving somewhere, I'm going somewhere, Starbucks will track my location as I'm going, and kind of follow me along a little bit, which is a little bit creepy. But at the same time, when I'm in a Starbucks area where they're offering a promotion, I'll get a notification. Hey, here's a promotion. Here's a free iced coffee at the Starbucks on Main Street if you get there before 3 o'clock, right? But for behind the scenes, that's the black box portion of it. I don't really know what's happening behind it, but the white box portion of this is I'm giving this thing more data and it's learning more about me. So I'm able to offer, it's able to offer me, and you, Christian, and other, customers, more customized promotions based on, and it's automated at times, right? But you can do this kind of on your own too if you want to build your own thing. So that's kind of more rapid trial and error. And that's kind of this white box, black box line. Same thing in the bottom right, which is a little bit different. It's kind of what I call this deliberate and well-tested method. So when I think about this space, it's very much, portfolio optimization or, retirement planning type of stuff. And what's the black box portion of it? The black box portion is I'm trying to predict the future. I don't know what combination of stocks and bonds is actually going to, how they're going to perform, what companies are going to exist 30 years from now, what the bond market is going to do. I can't predict that as a layperson, right? Or as a customer that's trying to have a small bank or even a large bank manage my account, let's say. But the white box portion of it is I know what level of risk I'm willing to accept, right? I know whether I'm risk averse or a risk seeker, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm somewhere in the middle at this point in my life. So that portfolio optimization is going to be tailored to me based on my risk profile, and an algorithm of sorts, the black box portion, will choose the appropriate investment planning for me. But this can be done in a white box fashion, where there's a researcher of some sort or a financial analyst that'll work with you to develop your plan. Right? Same thing with production and inventory. If you use some sort of inventory management tool, same sort of idea, right? Where I may not have a total picture of my demand, but the point of sale data the inventory management system will tell you about that. And then it'll tell me what my replenishment system is and how often to reorder, when to reorder, that kind of stuff. But by and large, I may know my suppliers and I have more control over that. The more white box stuff is very much more hands-on. Like I said, the call center operations, in a sense, becomes more white box. But if you wanted to get kind of further into that upper right-hand quadrant, it's really just pure subject matter expertise. You don't need a lot of data, but you might have really just kind of working in this space for several years. That will help you kind of make decisions. So I would call it human intelligence / small data, but it's really kind of subject matter expertise at that same time. So that makes sense.
Gotcha. Yeah. So basically, AI, big data, is probably what we all want to get to, but it gathers data for us to make decisions. Then
sure.
The bottom right, deliberate, well-tested methods, is a little bit of a mix of AI and us testing methods. And top left is we're learning as we go.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
With a mix of the data still. And
Yeah.
then top right is basically us, grinding.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. You're grinding it out. Yeah, basically. And you might use some stuff. You might have some Excel stuff, or maybe you have some data somewhere, but it's not hundreds of thousands of transactions or hundreds of thousands of observations, millions of observations. Even like what makes big data so powerful is things that we wouldn't, kind of the bottom left quadrant, if I may, things that we wouldn't normally consider as data. Big data and AI can use that. So text mining data, looking for the same word across, the Twitter sphere, so to speak,
Yeah.
right? And where that comes from, that's extremely advanced. And there are tools that can do that. Is it necessary in every instance? And in most instances, no. But this is kind of alludes to my point, earlier, kind of earlier in the talk, where a lot of companies, because it's popular, have said, I need this text mining tool because that's going to give me an advantage. And it may not necessarily give you that advantage. And you need to think about what you're trying to, unlock. What's your driving question? And that will help you choose what works from this four quadrants. When I have some examples of some tools, and I know you guys will get the slides at the very end after the talk. So there's a couple of live links at the very end where you can try and look at some types of solution that may work for you, depending on what your applications are. So let me transition to the next slide here. So when I don't use equations, like I like kind of visual Venn diagram types of things. So I have these four areas here that I think are relevant here. You have kind of that white space there is kind of the area, what I'm calling the area of strategic exploration. It's kind of, I kind of have to thug it out, I guess, grind out a little bit. I don't really know how to kind of operate, but I have to rely on my gut a little bit. But for space A that you see here in yellow, AI is really discouraged. You want to rely on more white box models. So something that's kind of more deliberate, more well-tested, that relies on system relationships, not quite completely white box, but there's some knowledge of prior system relationships that you can leverage, okay? And you have some data that you can use. Whereas item B, kind of space B, there's this, space where you may have tons and tons of data, where these white box models are kind of discouraged, because since you have so much data, the AI can find patterns and big data patterns that you as a person just cannot find. You don't have the bandwidth to compute that. I'm hesitant to say that computers are smarter than people, but there are some cases where computers can outperform us computationally, quite frankly. So, but there's a nice home, what I call the area C, it's kind of the green area, where rapid trial and error is kind of preferred. That was that top left quadrant, right? Where the Starbucks example, where it's a nice home for that, where it's kind of a mix of the black box, white box, kind of a gray box, if you will. But I have a roadmap of some questions that you could ask yourself, kind of yes, no questions. And based on how you respond to them, it'll put you in one of these areas, right? And that'll kind of inform whether you need to use black box, white box types of things. So I can walk through those questions, if you will, and see where we land. So yeah. So actually, it's 5 questions. So first question is the intent of the driving question to change the system where I'm generating data? So that question means, am I designing something brand new, right? Am I designing something from the ground up? Okay. Question 2 is, do I need to explain my decision using causality? Do I need to make a decision based on prior information? So you can see how these 2 questions are very different from one another. They get at different things. Now, question 3 is, do I have an understanding of causality of the new system? Do I have an idea of how this even works? And then question 4 and question 5 are really around your ability to collect data. So question 4, do I have a lot of data on the system? And question 5, if I don't, can I collect it quickly, right? Or inexpensively with minimal effort? And I won't go through all these yes and no machinations here. You guys have that. But this is a nice little roadmap that kind of tells you, based on how you're answering these questions, where you fall, right? This area of strategic exploration is a little bit murky, a little bit cloudy. But if I'm designing a new system where I need to explain causality, right? I kind of am in this area of exploration where I kind of need to rely on prior judgment of some sort. So, but the other areas, A, B, and C, are much more straightforward in a sense. So, and if you can't really find a home for where you are, you may have to kind of go back and revisit that driving question and say, all right, I think I need to really rethink, what my North Star is. Maybe I'm not formulating the question properly. I need to go back and think about what I'm trying to solve for, right? So I hope this is helpful. And I can go back to the hospital example, which I'm going to do on the next slide. And what ended up happening in this hospital case is these are just kind of the answers to the hospital example, and ended up leading to white box solutions. So we weren't going to design a new system. We're not going to design a new healthcare system, a new hospital. But causality is important, especially when I'm dealing with patients. I need to understand why this patient moved from place to place, why they're diagnosed with a certain thing, why they have a certain treatment protocol. And I don't have a ton of data, right? And I can't collect it. Collecting patient data is expensive. I just don't have the patient and I have no control over that. So I need to rely on something more white box. So the solution here was, if you're familiar with Lean Six Sigma, was a kind of a lean approach where we look back at some of the bottlenecks of wait times. We had some data, some historical data, to try to uncover the causes of those bottlenecks. And that allowed us to reallocate certain resources. And in this case, we upgraded some of the IT systems to move data around and information to facilitate communication between different areas. So there's really kind of a process redesign and a resource allocation shift. But ultimately, the wait times, unlocking that wait time issue was what was transformational in this case to, providing patients with better quality of care. So I'll pause here again. Christian, I don't know if you have questions from the audience or if you have anything you want to chat about here, but that's kind of where we left it here with the hospital example.
Sure. So yeah, let's see if we have any questions. Does anyone drop them into the Q&A? But as for me, it's I get it. What you want to do is sort of come up with what's the issue and what question is going to sort of open up the answers to the right.
Yeah, the question will tell you where to look,
right,
and helps to balance that trade-off, right, and lead to a win-win. But it's really understanding the relationship between the pros and the cons of that trade-off, and kind of taking a deep dive into that. What's that transformational issue that helps me unlock that breakthrough? Because that will really start to tell you where you need to look, where you need to go under the hood, right? So, and again, it may not necessarily be a big data solution or a high-powered analytic solution. It just could be, I figured out this relationship. You can probably figure it out on the back of an envelope or something with a pen and paper if that was the case. But it's not always big data in this instance. So, but with that said, I'll conclude here with some analytics resources. Some of these things you may be familiar with. So for instance, in the bottom left, Tableau, so those of you who deal with a lot of data, it's a data visualization tool. I can plot stuff in graphs and all that good stuff and automate things. Also R, I don't know if there's analytics folks in there, but you can really customize your own thing. But top left, HubSpot, it's a promotional tool. So, and there's a couple of other things in there, but HubSpot is probably one of the more popular ones that people use, where I'm using it to automate my promotional activity, emails and stuff. There's a bunch of other tools out there. Bottom right, I think you're all familiar with Square. That's an inventory management tool. There's some guts behind that are tried and true textbook inventory management stuff. So that's white box, right? We know how that operates, but it can also integrate customer behaviors into it and then kind of develop a customized profile in some aspects. But White box Monday is a good example of a white box. So it's basically like a all one-stop project management kind of tool to help you organize yourself. So it doesn't rely on data. It's really relying on tasks and steps, and you put in your values, and it helps you create a project plan. Microsoft Project is good too. A lot of the Microsoft suite, like really Excel and Access and Project can be customized in some aspect as well. But these are some, examples of some resources that could be utilized here in some aspects. So yeah, I just wanted to share these with you, kind of as a guide, as a roadmap. So yeah, and then these will be,
Awesome.
like these resources will be available to you. You can click around and stuff, but also available as a resource through the Small Business Development Corporation as well at Rutgers University for those who have further insights or questions that you'd be interested in. So
Awesome. Awesome. So let's I have a few interesting questions here.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So let's see. Okay, let's go with, sorry if I butcher your name, but Vipin. And he asks, are we using a fishbone diagram or 5 whys or something else to get to the right question to ask?
So I'll answer that briefly. So that's a Six Sigma question. So somebody who's very well versed in Lean and Six Sigma. So for those of you who don't know or aren't familiar with it, a fishbone diagram is a qualitative way with no or limited data that allows you to understand the root causes of a problem. So you have the head of the fish, that's the thing you're trying to solve for, and you have the ribs or the bones of a fish that are different types of issues, and you basically drill down using the 5 whys. So we did use a qualitative, for the hospital example, a qualitative root cause analysis tool. It wasn't a fishbone diagram, it was a different tool. It was a FMEA, which is a different type of tool, but it's a qualitative tool. It just wasn't relevant for us, but we could have. We just thought that a FMEA diagram was more relevant. But that's a good question. Somebody is well versed in Lean, and if that person's happy I'm a black belt from a Six Sigma black belt from back in the day. So I can take more questions about that stuff offline if folks are interested.
Awesome. All right, let's see. I have another question, and it was in the chat. Let me get back to that one. Do you have any more small business examples, even small business professional consulting services?
So we haven't, so short answer is this is a more kind of in its research infancy. So we've looked back at historical cases. Some cases are for smaller businesses, but they're not, most of them are predominantly, the hospital example is one of them that we extracted. I have a list of some others that if you're interested, I can share with you offline. And we're working on a total, like an academic paper that looks at all these different cases in different industries, but nothing that was specific guidance to small businesses. But I will say, the problems that we solve in academia in some instances and also in large businesses, there is a large overlap. And we've talked with folks and academic leaders who work with small businesses as well, and kind of consulted with them. And one of our co-authors on this project, the co-researchers, is a management consultant. And I'm a former management consultant from back in the day. So this is informed by some of those experiences that we've had working with smaller companies. And so we haven't overlooked that per se, but some of the examples, since we're publishing this and we're hoping to publish this in a larger journal, are more kind of larger businesses, but we didn't lose sight of that. At least it's built into the thinking. But in the future, we may hope to extend that directly to small businesses. So it's a good question, though.
Awesome. So I have a last question here, Majgan, and he asks, does Mark or anyone at Rutgers can help small businesses, or can we contact Mark privately?
Yeah, so I think that's an SBDC question from what I've been told. You can go through the SBDC, so I'm be able to be contacted through the SBDC. I know that we've got some resources here, so that's probably a question that maybe Christian or maybe some of the other folks offline. I don't know how you want to handle that, but I'm happy to be contacted directly. Or even if I can share my contact info, that's fine. But I think there is a certain chain of command in terms of how to, engage me with the SBDC.
Yeah.
And there are a number of faculty members at RBS that are affiliated with the SBDC as well. So depending on the type of issue, it may not be a supply chain or analytics issue, but it runs the gamut. There's a lot of resources at SBDC, particularly at Rutgers that I can speak towards. So for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And statewide. So if you're in New Jersey, you can obviously contact a professional that pretty much will cover any aspect of your business.
Right.
So let me drop a link in the chat so that you guys can go ahead. And so first step would be finding your county there. So just look for your county, then click the link on the right column on that site, and you'll be able to connect with someone. Let's see. All right, we have a question by Shelley. It says, what do you recommend to transfer or communicate the data/information to a user-friendly version in order to deal with customers?
To deal with customers. So I think it depends. I think it depends on the volume of data. For small things, it could be Excel, PowerPoint, something. If you have data and you want to chart up some stuff, you can probably do it in Excel at low cost. And I think that Microsoft offers a free web-based version. I think they started doing this during COVID, like a web-based version of Excel that's accessible for anybody. And you can chart up things. And I know Google Sheets has stuff too. You can charts, graphs, diagrams that you can communicate to customers directly and paste them in a Word document or a Google Doc of some sort and PDF it. And you can use it as like a client information sheet if you'd like. But for more sophisticated stuff where you've got hundreds of thousands of variables and lines of data, you may want to look into something like Tableau or R. To do that now is much more sophisticated visualizations. And for unstructured data, I like, there's Google Trends sometimes has some, and I think that's free too. Just kind of for web stuff. If you just want to get some cursory information, you can use Google Trends to kind of understand certain behaviors, web-based things and things like that. But it's case by case, depending on what you're trying to solve for. So.
Yeah. Definitely. I mean, I think for most small businesses, I think if you probably have a POS system, you probably have a website, and I would probably recommend Google Analytics.
Google Analytics is great too.
And having a Facebook pixel on your site so it could capture the data, and then you can read that data on Facebook. I think those are the two best ways, at least online, in terms of online businesses.
Yeah, but I do want to stress that you need to be very clear about what you're trying to solve for, because you could really go down a path of inundating yourself with data too. You kind of have all these widgets and stuff, and they're all generating data. So you could just you don't want to spin your wheels either, and you have all this stuff, and you're like, I don't even know where to begin, right? So really hone in on that driving question first, and then it'll kind of help you unlock some things in terms of, maybe I need a Facebook widget, or maybe I need this, maybe I need that. Those types of things have become clearer. So.
Awesome. All right. So I think that, let's see, any last questions, guys? Drop them in. We have, how long do we have? We have about 2 minutes to close out here, but we could take one more question.
Sure.
In the meantime, let me go ahead and get to sharing my screen again here.
Yeah, let me stop. I'll stop sharing here. There you go.
There we go. All right. Okay, so we have one of our support staff. We put a link into the chat where it says, if you'd like to reach out to Dr. Rogers, you're going to please fill out a survey. So go ahead and look into the chat and find that link, fill out that survey so we can connect you. But I think that pretty much wraps it up.
Great.
Yeah. So thank you, everyone. For our next event, we have Charles Evans and he's going to show you guys how to restructure debt and save your business. This is all about, debt and bankruptcy. So I know that's a difficult situation, especially now COVID-19, it affected a lot of businesses. So Charles will be able to help you figure out strategies to change that. Once again, we're
I
the
see in the chat,
NJSBDC.
there's some folks saying that the link isn't working for the survey.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, let's actually check that out. I'm gonna check it out live because I'm a committed host. Okay. It's working on my end. So what you have to do is click on the button that says next here on the bottom left, and you should go ahead and get to the survey. All right. If you have any more issues, I think it was Shelly who asked, please email us at, I'm putting the email into the chat, cares.admin@njsbdc.com. So if you have any issues, please email us there. All right, so that wraps it up. Again, we are the NJSBDC. We've helped over 13,000 small businesses in New Jersey. To get started, go to njsbdc.com/request-counseling. We've dropped the link into the chat. I'll give you guys some time to go ahead and click that. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you so much, Mark. Incredible wealth of knowledge. So see you guys next Thursday, same time, same place.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, everyone.
Take care, everyone. Bye.